Welcome to the Tim Booker channel, where wisdom is worth spreading. Wishing you a pleasant listening experience. Hello, welcome to listen to this book every day. I am Pan Su. Today, the book I am interpreting for you is Upstream. What is upstream thinking? The author tells a story in this book. Once upon a time, two people were walking on the road when they suddenly heard someone shouting for help from the river under the bridge. They saw a child about to drown, so they quickly jumped into the water to rescue the child. After finally rescuing the child onto the shore, something strange happened. They heard another child's cry for help from the river, so they had to jump back into the water to save another person. And then, one after another, more children kept drowning, and they became exhausted. At this moment, one of them went ashore and walked away into the distance. His companion felt surprised and asked, "Where are you going when we can't save these children?" He replied, "I am going upstream to see who is throwing these children into the water." Okay, the story ends here. If you think about it carefully, in this story, one person is desperately trying to save people in the river, while the other person is going upstream to find the cause. These two different approaches actually represent two different ways of thinking in life. The first one is downstream thinking. This person is always downstream, dealing with problems as they come. Dealing with some emergencies once may be manageable, but if one stays in such a state for a long time, it will rapidly deplete their resources. In the end, it's easy to understand that they are always reactive, exhausted, and often only addressing symptoms instead of the root causes. On the other hand, the corresponding approach is having upstream thinking. Upstream thinking is a way to prevent problems in advance and take proactive measures. If you can anticipate problems in advance and take the initiative, life will undoubtedly be much smoother. However, who wouldn't want to have upstream thinking? In reality, though, only a few people truly achieve it. As the subtitle of this book suggests, it provides a way to transform passivity into proactive thinking. If you want to change from being idle to taking charge of your life, becoming a proactive thinker, then I believe this book can offer you some inspiration. The author of this book is Dan Heath. He used to work as a researcher at Harvard Business School and is currently studying management at Duke University in the United States. You may already be familiar with the name Dan Heath. He has a brother named Chip Heath, and they are both organizational behaviorists who have collaborated on many best-selling books, such as Decisive, Switch, and The Power of Moments. In this book, Upstream, Dan Heath doesn't delve into complex theories. Instead, he uses numerous case studies to convince us to shift our focus to upstream thinking. Whether it's in personal life, organizational management, or national development, we shouldn't merely address symptoms repeatedly but actively seek fundamental solutions and change the rules to truly transform our situations. Next, we will divide today's interpretation into two parts. In the first part, we will discuss the difficulties of taking upstream actions. What factors lead us to prefer reactive responses instead of proactive interventions? In the second part, we will talk about how we can embrace upstream thinking. Alright, let's first address the first question: what factors hinder us from taking upstream actions and make us more inclined to react passively to problems? In this book, the author summarizes three common situations in life that lead us to indulge in downstream actions, forgetting that we could have gone upstream. The first situation can be summarized as, "I can't deal with that problem right now." Imagine a person who is constantly rescuing people in the river. If you tell them, "Hey, stop rescuing for a moment and go upstream to see what's causing this," they will probably respond, "Wait, the situation here is urgent, I can't leave right now." This is the reality for most people because there are simply too many urgent matters in work and life. Numerous psychological studies show that focusing on immediate emergencies is the default mode of human thinking. However, the key is that when people are overwhelmed with multiple problems, they stop trying to solve all of them. Their vision becomes narrow, lacking long-term planning, and they fail to prioritize strategically. Consequently, they end up in a short-term, crisis-oriented thinking trap of doing whatever is most urgent. Over time, they get trapped in what the author metaphorically calls tunnel unemployment, where their thinking is confined within a long, unending tunnel with only one path forward. It becomes difficult for them to pause and consider whether there are other ways outside the tunnel and what truly matters to them. Downstream actions are usually pressing and must be addressed immediately, offering instant feedback and a sense of accomplishment once solved. In contrast, upstream actions are challenging and require patience and dedication. For instance, the author mentions an exchange with a deputy commissioner of a Canadian police department in 2009. Many police officers were caught up in the role of catching criminals, considering arresting a suspect much easier than preventing a child from taking drugs. Two officers illustrate this: one patrols in a high-accident area, and drivers are more cautious when they see him, potentially reducing violations and accidents. The other officer hides around corners, solely issuing tickets to those breaking traffic rules. So, who do you think will have better results in the end? The deputy commissioner replies that the first officer has made a more significant contribution to public safety, but the second officer will receive more commendations because the pile of tickets he holds proves his efforts. You see, the work rules and rewards favor those solving urgent problems, and those always addressing such problems to gain small achievements have neither the time nor the inclination to change the passive situation. Most of us are actually not aware that when we say, "I can't deal with that problem right now," it generally means we won't have time to deal with it later either. Though it may sting a bit, this is indeed the reality. Various urgent matters squeeze out the truly important things for you, and that's the danger in it. Alright, let's look at the second situation, which can be summarized as, "This is not a problem." Going back to the initial story, the river was frequently filled with cries for help from drowning children. As more and more people joined the rescue effort, the person downstream, as we mentioned earlier, became an experienced rescuer. If you were to ask him now, "Why do children keep drowning in this river?" he might turn to you with resignation and say, "This river has always been like this, nothing unusual." This is what the author refers to in the book as the power of habits. For instance, when you walk into a room, you may immediately notice the warm sound of the air conditioning, but after staying for 5 minutes, you gradually stop hearing the sound and think everything is normal. Similarly, if we are trapped in certain irrational rules for an extended period, we may initially find them strange, but over time, we adapt to their existence and even stop considering them as problems, let alone thinking about going upstream. Dr. Marcus Elliott, a physician and sports coach, witnessed a similar scenario when he joined a rugby team in 1999. Many believed that rugby itself was a tough sport, and player injuries were inevitable, so it was no surprise to have numerous players with tendon strains in the team. Some even thought that getting injured was a sign of trying your best. However, Elliott saw things differently. He believed that most injuries were due to improper training. Therefore, during training, he carefully studied each athlete, conducted strength tests, and customized training plans for them. Moreover, based on existing data, he focused on those players whose tendons were more prone to injury. Of course, there was resistance to changing the training program, but under Elliott's leadership, the number of injuries in the team decreased from 22 to only 3, and they achieved better results in competitions. Later, Elliott founded a sports company specializing in evaluating and training athletes. Over half of the players in the National Basketball Association, NBA, have undergone his company's sports analysis. Injury prevention science has become increasingly popular in professional sports. For another example, in 1998, if you were a high school student attending public schools in Chicago, the probability of graduating was about the same as flipping a coin, approximately 52.4%. What does 52.4% mean? It means that, in the vast public school system, out of over 360,000 students, about 190,000 students would not be able to graduate. They would either end up drifting in society or becoming unemployed. This was the education situation in Chicago at the time. The author interviewed a high school principal who lamented that for a long time, people had the idea that there were only two outcomes for students after high school, success or failure. For these students, high school was the determining factor. If they couldn't graduate successfully, it was undoubtedly their fault, and no one would question that. You see, when people are trapped in an unreasonable environment or rules for a long time, they become adaptive and fail to notice the problems within it. Alright, up to this point, we have covered the first two situations: "I can't deal with this problem right now," and "This is not a problem." The last situation mentioned by the author in this book is called "This is not my problem," where the addition of the modifier, "my," holds significance. Let's return to the scenario of the reasonable rescue effort. Let's assume the person who went upstream was fortunate enough to discover the reasons why children were drowning. But how should they take action? In reality, the problem is often complex and difficult to handle, or after some consideration, the person might evaluate the problem and feel that it's not their responsibility to solve it. As a result, the upstream action becomes stagnant, and the drowning situation for children remains unchanged. The difficulty with upstream action lies in the fact that it is entirely voluntary and not mandatory. Generally, downstream action has clear responsibility assigned to it. However, as you move upstream, more people are involved, and the scope of the problem becomes broader, often with no specific individuals held accountable. This can lead to situations where many people have the ability to solve the problem, but due to risk avoidance, fear of responsibility, or a belief that they are not qualified, they are unwilling to take action. For example, when addressing the issue of improving the graduation rate of high school students in Chicago public schools, many individuals may believe they are merely high school teachers or principals, and they do not have the capacity to change the entire education system. They feel helpless, even though they understand the family situations of many students. Another instance involves a global online travel website, Easy Travel, which encountered a significant problem in 2012. The head of the customer experience team discovered a highly unreasonable data point: approximately 58 out of 100 customers who booked services like flights, hotels, or car rentals on the website ended up calling the customer service hotline seeking assistance after completing their bookings. The major appeal of an online travel website is the ability to complete the entire booking and payment process online without having to engage in lengthy phone calls, which could be bothersome. So, why did this issue occur? After conducting research, they found that approximately 20 million calls were made mainly because customers were seeking their itinerary. If the support cost per call was calculated at $5, then the total cost of this single issue would be as high as $100 million. Why couldn't customers automatically receive their itinerary? The reasons were simple: either customers provided incorrect email addresses, or the itinerary ended up in their spam folder, or they accidentally deleted it thinking it was spam. Moreover, customers had not yet learned how to retrieve their itineraries from the website, so they had to call customer service. Upon discovering this problem, Easy Travel promptly formed a team and deployed a corresponding solution. Since 2012, the proportion of customers calling the customer service hotline has decreased to around 15%, achieving excellent results. However, people are more curious about why Easy Travel, being a large company, only became aware of the issue when there were 20 million calls. Why didn't they address the problem when they reached 1 million or even 100,000 calls? The reason lies in the third situation we just mentioned: this is not my problem. Like most companies, Easy Travel divided its employees into different teams, each with its own focus. The marketing team was responsible for attracting customers to the website, the product team convinced customers to complete their bookings online, the technical team maintained the website's smooth operation, and the customer service team needed to respond quickly to customers' issues and provide satisfactory solutions. Notice that in this process, there was no team whose responsibility was to ensure that customers didn't need to make calls seeking help. In fact, when the problem initially surfaced, each team did notice it, but no one or team took responsibility, thinking it was not their problem. Consequently, without anyone willingly taking up this upstream responsibility, the potential problem remained unresolved. The difficulty with upstream action lies in the fact that it not only requires the wisdom to change the rules and go against the flow but also demands the determination and courage to take responsibility. Alright, the above is the content of the first part. In summary, there are 3 barriers that prevent us from taking upstream action. First, we get absorbed in solving various urgent problems, which makes us appear busy with no time to spare. Second, due to habits or rigid thinking, we fail to see the existence of certain problems. Finally, there is a lack of willingness to take responsibility or the subjective initiative to move forward. Fortunately, once we recognize these barriers, it indicates that we can avoid these traps and start moving upstream. If you, like me, are mentally prepared to change this passive situation, let's discuss how we can master upstream thinking. There are several specific strategies, and the author details 7 methods in this book. They are: uniting suitable people, having awareness to change the system, finding leverage points, detecting problems in advance, setting measurable success indicators, predicting potential related problems in advance, and seeking sources of information. From these 7 methods, I will summarize the 2 most essential ones that closely relate to our work and life. The first method is to proactively find signals and intervene. Mastering upstream thinking means being able to recognize that there are still many things we can do before a problem occurs. While it might not be possible to avoid problems at the root cause, we can at least reduce the probability of their occurrence. We can go upstream to find the best intervention points for the problem and buy time for future actions. For example, as mentioned earlier, Dr. Elliott, a doctor and sports coach for a rugby team, aimed to reduce the probability of athlete injuries. He identified the risk signal by analyzing the forces acting on the athlete's muscles during various movements. Using advanced three-dimensional motion capture technology, he performed detailed microanalysis during running, jumping, and rotating. By identifying imbalances between certain muscle groups, he could address these issues through customized training programs, thus reducing the risk of injuries. Similarly, the professional networking site LinkedIn faced a high churn rate for one of its popular products. Instead of focusing solely on the churn rate as a risk signal, the department head, Rolly Sachan, recognized that customer engagement after purchase was a more critical signal. Analyzing data, they found that customers who used the product within the first 30 days were 5 times more likely to continue using LinkedIn services than those who didn't. By guiding customers to use the product within the initial 30 days, they could significantly increase customer retention and revenue. There are numerous other similar cases. For example, in the case of Chicago public high school graduation rates, researchers found 2 effective risk signals: completing the required 5 course credits and not failing a core subject like math or English for more than 1 semester. Based on these signals, schools and teachers adjusted their teaching methods to ensure all students could graduate successfully. As a result of these upstream actions, Chicago's public high school graduation rate increased from 52.4% to 78% in 2018, saving the futures of thousands of students and creating a value of over $10 billion and still growing. You see, by proactively finding signals and taking upstream actions, we can reap significant rewards. Sure, let's move on to the second method, called formal system complexity. In other words, to master upstream thinking, we must learn to approach problems from the perspective of system changes in various situations. In the real world, on an almost infinitely extendable timeline, upstream is just a relative concept to downstream. For a given problem, we can intervene at multiple points in time. In other words, upstream is not a specific destination but a broad direction in which we go against the flow. For instance, compared to drowning, using a lifebuoy is a solution for swimming. Learning how to swim, in turn, is an even more upstream solution. We can always go further upstream, but as we do, the scope of the problem increases, and the solutions become more complex. Especially in some public domains, if we only consider a specific local problem without anticipating possible second-order effects, we might end up with unintended consequences. This happens when we address a particular problem but inadvertently trigger another one due to a lack of systemic thinking. For example, in an effort to protect the environment, the city government of Chicago passed a law in 2014 banning the use of disposable plastic bags in stores. However, when we think from a systemic change perspective, what potential second-order effects might arise from banning plastic bags? What might replace disposable plastic bags? People might end up using more paper bags, reusable bags, or forego shopping bags altogether. The author presents some academic research results in this book, which objectively analyzed the environmental impact of various bag materials. Taking into account factors like production, transportation, actual usage, and others, it becomes challenging to assert that a complete ban on disposable plastic bags is the most environmentally friendly policy. In reality, when faced with the sudden ban, some stores started offering thicker plastic bags near the checkout counter, assuming customers would reuse them. However, most customers didn't, resulting in a counterproductive environmental impact. Then, in 2016, the government addressed this issue by prohibiting the use of these thicker plastic bags as well, causing a surge in kitchen trash bag sales. Moreover, due to a shortage of plastic bags, some people believe this accelerated the spread of diseases, as homeless individuals often used plastic bags to handle waste, and the alternative solutions were less sanitary. As you can see, a public policy surrounding a simple plastic bag involves multiple interests and is inherently complex. As the author states in the book, we are still novices in the realm of upstream thinking. Therefore, concerning the method of dealing with formal system complexity, besides anticipating second-order effects in advance, the author reminds us to unite suitable people, find leverage points, and take steps cautiously when dealing with complex problems. For instance, public policies can be initiated with small-scale pilot programs to explore and evaluate which measures are feasible, which are not, and what conditions they require. In 2017, after exploring various options, the Chicago city government found that stores could offer customers the option of choosing between paper bags and plastic bags, but each plastic bag would have an additional 7-cent tax. This approach proved to be the most environmentally friendly. Do you see? The so-called formal system complexity refers to the need for us to invest more time in holistic, interconnected, and dynamic thinking about the problem rather than just focusing on the specific issue that initially caught our attention. Alright, here I have introduced 2 concrete methods for mastering upstream thinking, proactively finding signals and intervening, and dealing with formal system complexity. However, the various cases of upstream thinking we mentioned earlier are somewhat related to organizations, such as schools, businesses, and cities. But if I want to apply upstream thinking in my daily life, how can I do that? The author concludes in this book that upstream thinking is neither profound nor complex. There's a saying we may have heard many times, but it remains true: the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Even if we only spend a little more time thinking at work than others or start exercising regularly from today, it means we are developing the awareness of upstream thinking and moving upstream in our lives. Alright, this is where we'll stop for the essence of this book on upstream thinking. Lastly, I'd like to share with you the most significant insight I gained after reading this book. In my view, upstream thinking is not just a proactive and preventive way of thinking. It is more like a little bit of goodwill toward the world after discarding all the techniques and methods. This tiny bit of goodwill is what drives a teacher to sacrifice their rest time to answer students' questions. It supports a doctor who, despite not having time to eat, still wants to see one more patient. It empowers a police officer to patiently communicate with a driver, repeatedly reminding them to drive safely. The world becomes better and better because of countless individuals like them. They are the ones who raise their voices, striving for a better life. They are the ones who go against the current. They are the unsung heroes in our ordinary days. As the author suggests, when you leave this world, try to make it a little better than the world you first encountered. Congratulations, you have just completed another book. Thank you for your support and attention. Please subscribe to Tim Booker's audiobook channel. Like and share with your family and friends. Wisdom is worth spreading. Click the notification button and be the first to experience the power of enemies, thinking, and wisdom, opening a brighter future. Thank you, goodbye.